is your relationship with time? Are you wired and tired, stressed and overwhelmed, busy and going nowhere? Or just want to scale your business? Welcome to Take Back Time with your host, Penny Zenker. Penny focuses on books, strategies, tools, and tips to help you work smarter and approach your time more strategically. As a result, you can have more energy, focus, and get more done in less time. Be more efficient and effective. Get ready to take back time.
Hello, and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zenker, and I'm your host. And today, I am super excited to have a Philadelphian on the line, Kevin Kruse, and he is founder and CEO of LEADx, and they are offering the world's first leadership training and coach powered by IBM Watson, which I'm sure he's going to tell us more about in our conversation together. And Kevin is also a New York Times bestselling author of 9 books. That's how actually I found Kevin, was from reading and really enjoying stuff that I said, hey, Kevin, you got to come and be on the show. And one of his books that just came out just on April 2nd is Great Leaders Have No Rules, Contrarian Leadership Principles to Transform Your Team and Your Business. And among many others, that the 15 secrets of highly successful and productive people. So we're going to talk about some of those books and principles. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Penny, thanks a lot. Yeah, it's great to be representing Philadelphia here.
Woohoo! Wish I could say that we were Super Bowl champions this year.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people would rather have rewatched the game from a year ago than the one that they just watched.
True that. True that. Would have been much more entertaining. So, Kevin, tell the readers, I mean, you've written 9 books around leadership and productivity. Kind of, I think somewhere I read that you were like an extreme productivity person. So where did you get the interest and the passion around productivity?
Well, sure. I wish it was different, but it's because I used to be so horrible at it. Like almost 30 years ago now, I started a company as an entrepreneur with the best of intentions, and it was all about hustle, and I was working around the clock, and I failed miserably. And my second business went out of business, and it took me 3 times to get it right. And thankfully, I've had some success since then. But when I look back, I was really bad at productivity. Like, working hard is not necessarily the same as being productive, or certainly not the same as being effective. And I also didn't know how to lead. If you think about leaders or managers or even entrepreneurs, there's always like, are you getting the right stuff done? And also, are you engaging your people? Are you attracting talented people and holding on to them? And I was pretty bad at both of those things. So over the years, I just tried to become a student of it and got a lot of great mentors. And when I sold previous company about 10 years ago, I was a single dad with 3 kids and said, all right, let me take some time off and raise my kids, do some nonprofit stuff. But that was the time, and I said, all right, let me go track down highly successful people around the world, self-made billionaires, self-made millionaires, and just get their opinion. Like, what's the number one secret? And then that started the 15 Secrets book. And now I flipped it back over to start looking at all the stupid things that people think they know about management and leadership that just don't work anymore. So it's really been that dual focus.
That's cool. So I want to talk about some of those things. So first, let's go back, and you've interviewed so many really cool people who are highly successful, high performers, and trying to find out the secrets, right? Unfortunately, we have to learn the hard way sometimes. What was the most shocking thing that you learned?
Well, yeah, that's easy, because this is what I get more hate mail about than anything else. As you mentioned, it ended up being almost 300 of the self-made billionaires, millionaires, but also Olympians, straight-A athletes. When I was about halfway through the interviews, I was only asking one open-ended question. Give me your number one secret to time management productivity. About halfway through, I realized nobody had mentioned a to-do list. So I would have thought that a lot of people would be, oh, you prioritize it. I got this system, A, B, C. That's the way we were all taught. And in fact, when I was doing the interviews, my to-do list was like on a yellow legal pad, extra long, 2 columns. That's how I tried to do it. And when I realized they weren't talking about it, I then started asking the follow-up question. I'd say, well, you didn't mention your to-do list. Do you have any tips on that? And most of them would laugh. To-do list? We don't use a to-do list. And as I dug in, it turns out that to-do list idea came from a guy named Ivy Lee, like over 100 years ago. And it was a time he said, oh, executives should write down 5 things on a piece of paper, stick it in their pocket, work on thing number 1. And when they're done, pull out the paper, look at thing number 2 and start working on that. And then you go home at 5 o'clock. And that might have been great advice for a quieter, slower, fewer items to do time, but it doesn't really work. A to-do list can work. I'm not anti-list. I have a grocery list. I have project lists.
Sure.
And our brains are pretty good at remembering things if it's maybe just a handful. When we get to about 10 things, like the amount of stuff we need to do on a weekend, a list might get us through. More than that, we're going to forget or choose the wrong thing. And a study a couple years ago shows that 40% of what we put on our to-do list never gets done at all. So the answer, of course, they're not using to-do lists, they're using their calendar. I hear this over and over again. If you really want to get something done, pick a day, pick a time, pick a duration. Schedule it. Yeah, schedule, don't list. So that was the thing. It changed my life. I didn't know that. I mean, I tell people, don't shoot the messenger. Like, this is just what people told me. It's funny, Penny, even it was about 2 weeks ago, I had a chance to talk to John Maxwell, who's this great legendary leadership coach. And he told me, we were talking about something else, and he kind of stumbled in. He said, Kevin, anytime from the last 20 years, you pick the day, you pick the hour, give me a minute, and I'll tell you exactly where I was and what I was doing. Because he said, I calendar everything, and I review that calendar. In fact, he takes a whole week, the last week of the year, to really go back. How much time was I spending on health? How about family? How about business? And then he reallocates the minutes for the upcoming year. Most of us just work off that to-do list, but it's just not that effective.
I want to talk about that for a minute because you're right. Our first inclination, going back to what you said earlier, is we work harder because our brain makes us think that that short-term solution of working harder is going to be better, but it's not, right? And I think the to-do list is the same thing. It's like that default thing that our brain says is make this to-do list, but actually ends up distracting us. Like you said, if 40% of it isn't even getting done, then most of the stuff on there is just a distraction from the things that are really important and really need our focus.
Yeah, you said it really well there, because it means that like the to-do list is the graveyard of important but not urgent, or important but not easy.
Or just the graveyard.
Just the graveyard. Because if we've got that, oh, wow, now I've got 30 minutes, what do? We look at the list and we pick the easy thing, the fun thing, the thing that fits within 30 minutes.
Because we're lazy.
Yeah, our brains aren't wired for success naturally.
Right. So that is, for everybody who's listening, we're not telling you to ditch your list entirely. However, we are telling you that if your primary focus is on your to-do list, then you're not working as efficient and effective as these self-made millionaires, billionaires, Olympic athletes, like people who are high performers. They are not focused on the list, just like they're probably not focused on time, right? Time makes us stressed out if we're focused on it.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing is, you said that the leadership principles that don't work anymore.
Right.
I think that's an interesting comment of what you made. We're in different times. And I'd love to have you make some comments about that, of what maybe it's something that's in your new book that can give people some insight around Great Leaders Have No Rules. What are some things that used to work that don't work now?
Yeah, there's so many. And again, these things maybe worked at one point. They came from a good place, but the times have changed. And a classic one is we've all heard to have that open door policy. And I mean, these days, most of us don't have offices and doors, but whether it's being accessible in the cube environment or through Slack at home, whatever it is, classic wisdom is to have that open door policy to facilitate communication and speed and leapfrogging, solve problems. But this day and age, especially with these interruption devices, also known as our smartphones, that policy is problematic in two ways. One, for the manager, the leader, we're getting interrupted all the time and we can't do our deep work. We can't do strategic thinking, creative thinking. We're never getting into flow, into the zone. But it's also bad for the team members who are coming through that open door. The coach, Marshall Goldsmith, executive coach, he did some writing and research on this, and he said, if someone's coming through your door every day with an unplanned item, he says either you hired the wrong person, or you didn't train them very well, or you don't have a culture of psychological safety. They're too scared to make a decision, to take action, to make a choice and be wrong. And so it's not a healthy relationship for your team either. So this day and age, I mean, Penny, I'm not saying like don't communicate, just slam the door. But close the door and open your calendar. Like maybe it's office hours and you could say whatever works for you. Maybe it's 2 hours a day are office hours where anybody could come in and bug you. Or maybe it's every afternoon, or maybe it's only on Fridays. Everybody's going to be different with their situation. But that open door policy is one that came from a good place and might have worked at one time. But this day and age is just driving us all crazy and not a real healthy dynamic for most teams as well.
Absolutely. I think we tend to take something. It's interesting, open door policies, as you said, we don't even have any doors anymore. And that supposedly was supposed to create more interaction, engagement, and it really just creates more distraction. So setting up those core times when people can reach you and having them have a plan when they come in makes 100% sense. What is it that we don't know this, intuitively, that some of these things that we know, but we don't do?
Again, when I think back, when I was in my 20s and young and dumb, and it's not that everybody who's in their 20s is young and dumb, it was just me. But for those of us who are newer to management leadership, we fall back on the wisdom of our older peers or even family members or parents. So I think a lot of this old and no longer effective advice is still out there. And I think that it's more like just understanding what the modern workplace is all about. I mean, again, it is contrarian to work from your calendar, not really your to-do list. Close that open door policy most of the time. Another one that I think the times have changed kind of recently is one of the chapters I say, reveal everything, even salaries.
I saw that.
Yeah, back in the day, it was like there were levels of secrecy. It was almost like the employees, you can't handle the truth. And I was told once, we're having a bad quarter, but don't tell the staff. Otherwise, they're all going to be updating their resumes and taking headhunter phone calls. And this day and age, I think that people have access to information easier than ever before. And especially the younger generation is more willing to share. They don't really care about privacy as much. So even when it comes to something like salary, I mean, that was so taboo when I was young. You would probably be fired if you told people how much money you made. That was like a state secret. And this day and age, I mean, people could just go online to salary.com or PayScale and quickly see what is the going rate for my position in my city in Philadelphia. And if you're young, half the time they're all comparing notes anyway. And as we've learned that secrecy has also bred things like the gender gap when it comes to pay. It's only when you shine a light on some of these things that things can change and improve. More and more people are becoming comfortable. Whether it's salary or something else, I mean, if you don't talk about it, people aren't stupid. Whatever they imagine is going to be worse than the reality anyway. Right. And if you aren't willing to share something like salary, I think this is an opportunity to say, well, why not? That means I don't have a system in place, or it is too arbitrary, or I haven't adjusted people in a while. And so take those steps. I mean, I think this is where some of the Silicon Valley companies have done well. I mean, they'll say, listen, for our software engineers, we pay at the 70% of going rate using this service to indicate what that is. And you'll make $10,000 more if you've got a master's degree, or you'll make $10,000 more if you have 3 years or more experience. It's a formula. And it doesn't mean everybody's going to be making exactly the same, but it's going to be close, and there's at least logic. When I find out that Penny and I are both programmers, and I found out she makes $125,000 a year and I make $120,000, there's probably now going to be a reason for that I can understand. How do I get that extra 5? So just really changes the dynamic when you create a culture that says, hey, we're going to share everything with you, the good and the bad, because we want your help fixing the bad, and we want you to trust us. When things get really bad, you don't have to wonder, we would be telling you. So if they're not that bad, then rally up with us and keep moving forward.
Right. Full transparency. I think that does foster trust. And I've seen it in organizations where it's been the opposite, right? And there wasn't very much transparency, and people really had issues with knowing what was the truth. So I do believe that, I'm not sure that I think that we should be sharing and discussing each person's salary with one another, because I think there's some other issues, but it doesn't need to be taboo, right? If you're not happy with your salary, it should be something that you can discuss. And if you're way underpaying your people, they're going to find out, like you said. So that's not a good thing.
Distractions are the enemy of productivity. Go to distractionquiz.com and find out your distraction profile. Are you a time zombie or a hamster? Take this free distraction quiz today to rate your ability to focus on what keeps you from being a wizard. Go to distractionquiz.com.
I want to come back to the title of your book, Have No Rules, right? That's one of your chapters in there.
Right.
And what are some of the productivity results from having no rules?
Yeah, I think that it gets back to, at a highest level, leadership. It starts with self-leadership. If leadership is influence, there's self-leadership. How do we lead ourselves? There's leadership at home, in our marriages, with our kids, and then, of course, at work. And it's not that I'm suggesting that everything runs amok. Like, you need rules if there's laws. I worked for a railroad, and one of the rules was you can't listen to music with earbuds when you're working on the railroad track. That's probably a pretty good rule to have. If you hire
for a reason.
Yeah, they're there for a reason. However, every time I bump into a rule, it takes away the opportunity for me to make a choice. It becomes your company, not my company. So rules get in the way of relationship. Rules crowd out conversation. Rules impede this idea of engagement. And I'll tell you a quick story. I was 30 years old and had sold my company, joined the company that acquired mine as a vice president. I was a partner, reported to the CEO. And he gave me the big pep talk. Hey, we're all equal partners here. Everybody gets one vote. We're all going to build this company to the next level together. Sounded good to me. And then 30 days in, I get my first expense report check back. And the check is short, like about $4. Uh-huh. And I sent a note to our CFO and just said, hey, Don, it's no big deal, but the check came back short. I assume I filled out the form wrong or something. And he emailed back right away and said, no. He says, we don't reimburse for Post-it notes. And I said, why? And he said, wasteful expense. Now, how much did I feel like a partner in the firm, an owner in the company, when I couldn't even buy Post-it notes? How much did I feel like a VP? How engaged? Did it feel like my company or their company? And they were the people that weren't letting me buy Post-it notes. And another friend of mine who had joined the firm, also at a partner level, same exact day, his check showed up short. And he found out that they don't reimburse for beer. He had bought a beer with dinner while he was traveling on business. Now, he could have bought a $6 milkshake. They would have paid for it, but they didn't want to pay for his $3 beer. And like all rules, they come from a good place. Like, organizations want to protect from losing money or risk, whatever it is. They're protecting against the 1% of knuckleheads, but the 99% are bumped into these rules.
Well, how interesting is that, how much it costs them for somebody to go through all of those expense reports in that detail? It's way more than the $3 or the $4 on each of your paychecks. So that's exactly just plain right. Stupid.
Most rules backfire. It either costs more to enforce them than to not have them, or people will do silly things. Like, there was a company, the person told me that they had sent out a proposal, a big proposal, and it had a typo in the budget, and it was embarrassing and all of that. So there was a new rule put into place. No salesperson could send out a proposal unless the chief financial officer approved the budget. Right. So they then missed $1 million opportunity because the CFO was sick that day that it was due. No one could sign it, and the rep wouldn't break the rule and send it in. So they lost out on $1 million opportunity. Another one of my readers had sent in, I was asking for examples of silly rules, and they said, we've got a rule where we're not allowed to spend more than $100 per night on a hotel for business travel. They said, we had a meeting in New York City. Well, you can't get a hotel room for $100 in New York City. So they got a $90 hotel room in New Jersey and then paid $100 for a rental car to drive from New Jersey into New York to do the meeting and back. So they spent $200 to not spend the extra $10 on the hotel room. With my Post-it note example, I went to war. It was called the Post-it note battle. And I talked to the CEO about it. And he said, Kevin, he says, here's the deal. He says, I don't care about Post-it notes. He said, one of our values is growth and profit. And that was a written value. It's not the mission, but he said, we need to survive. That's the air we breathe. So this is a symbol. He said, most people, they buy Post-it notes and they scribble little phone messages or other things. And he says, I don't use Post-it notes. He says, I take my leftover printer paper and I tear it into little squares. And he had a stack of this torn paper on his desk. And he said, it's a symbol of frugality. So here's what happened. He agreed He didn't want everybody to be upset, so he changed the rule. We could now buy Post-it notes. But because he had a conversation with me, we had a little bit of a relationship sharing what was going on here. And because he linked it to a value, I never bought Post-it notes again. And to this day, I rip up little pieces of paper and put them on my desk to take little notes from phone calls and messages and things. So rules are arbitrary. They're black and white. They don't consider circumstance. Better than rules are use your values, whether it's your family values, values in a marriage, or values at work, as guardrails. These are your bumper cars. You're bumping into these, but there's some wiggle in between. And instead of just having a rule, you have a conversation. And if some knucklehead is spending money wastefully or dressing inappropriately at the office or taking too many days of vacation, well, that's a coaching conversation. You let them know, hey, this is out of the norm and the average, and here's our concern about it and the downside. And then hopefully that corrects the behavior, or you have a tougher conversation. But to arbitrarily apply that dress code rule, everybody gets 10 days off vacation, whatever that is, it does more harm than good.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that. At first I was going to say, well, don't you think we really need more personal rules sometimes because we don't have boundaries? Then we're violating our own values because we're not putting boundaries in place. But when it comes to the business, I have seen the same thing that you've seen. I was actually coaching a large chiropractic group that has multiple locations. And because of something that one doctor did, they put a rule in place that limited everyone. And it really impacted the whole trust of all the doctors together with the owners. And it's interesting. I think it really does create some limitations and a barrier in a way, like you said, because it's not taking into consideration context, and it's really taking one bad egg who should have a conversation with versus making a rule across the board. So I do agree with that. Many companies have way too many rules that they need to evaluate. So, and that being said, I also think, and I'd like your opinion on people who don't, it seems like today that people are setting fewer boundaries for themselves and rules for themselves so that they can be less distracted. Rules about don't look at your phone every 10 minutes, right? Let's talk about that. Like, what about personal rules?
Yeah, and this is where I think you bring up a good point. And I think I myself would need to think more about rules versus holding myself to a higher standard. And so I think that, and I'm glad you asked the question, because the book is Great Leaders Have No Rules, but it's not just about leadership at work. As I say, it starts with self-leadership and then family leadership. And I think that in general, I think where rules for our own lives go wrong is when we don't challenge them. So some people might have like a rule like, I will never date a person who blank, who smokes or isn't my religion or isn't an age range or whatever it is. Often we have these rules, conscious or unconscious, that guide us. Or I will never start a business until my kids are out of college or whatever that might be. And I think a lot of these rules box us in arbitrarily. They make our life smaller, not larger.
It might be value-based. I want to interrupt though there.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. So let's give an example. What would be a rule that would be value-based?
Well, you said, for instance, that I'm not going to start my business until my kids are out of elementary school or something like that.
Right. What is it that you value? Your time with your kids or?
So yeah, whoever is doing that, their value might be, that those are the impressionable years and therefore they want to be home during those years.
Yeah, I like that. So again, in terms of rules, taking out conversation and a rule replacement would be start with values. Then what I would say is, I like that. It's funny, I had a similar thing. The reason why I didn't start the current business LEADx until 2 years ago was because I had 3 kids at home and I waited till the first 2 were off to college before starting up. But in my case, it wasn't sort of that black and white rule where it was, okay, I'm just not going to start another business till all the kids are out. It became, I'm not going to start a business because I'm valuing my time being dad and raising good kids. And it was like an ongoing conversation with myself where all of a sudden I realized, 2 of my kids are now out. I've now got 1, and he's a boy that doesn't seem to be around or need me as much as the girls, and he's getting ready to drive himself to school, and there's not the early morning stuff now that he's 16. And then I thought about, can I start a business and still give him what he needs from a parent.
Right.
And so I think, to me, a rule is like, it's that inflexible thing. Like, you cannot stay at a hotel that costs over $100 and then nobody ever does it. I think the value is like, be frugal while you travel. It is frugal for New York City, and I think it's subtle, but I think as long as you're willing to evaluate your rule on a continual basis, then I'd be okay with it.
I do talk about it. Hope you don't mind that we're creating like a little banter here.
Yeah, I like that.
That when it's principle based, that's why I like when you said, it's value based, is that it's important to challenge it. So for instance, like if it's principle based and you say, I don't eat meat, for instance, right? And that's a rule. I find that when we have those rules and principles for ourselves, it helps us, makes our life easier in a way because it's a decision already made, right?
Right.
So if and I like the idea that you challenge it and see, well, what are the benefits? What are the costs? And why is this important to me? And then you can decide, is this a guiding principle for my life or is this just for now?
Right.
Like you said, it's a matter of challenging it because some of those rules can really serve us. So for instance, if I brush my teeth, I don't eat after I brush my teeth, right? So it's kind of a rule or principle. Have I ever broken it? Yeah, maybe, but it helps me from overeating at night because then I'll just go brush my teeth and I kind of have this rule and principle that supports me and then I can use it to my benefit. Do you know what I mean?
I love that example because I'm also all about like habits. And so like that brush the teeth thing is a really good one, especially if I don't want to snack at night. Eat dinner and brush my teeth, right?
Some rules can benefit us.
Well, but I don't call that a rule. I call it a principle.
Okay, gotcha. So that's what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because in my mind, the rule becomes a negative when crossed. And this is where people really go crazy. Like, I don't think we should have rules with our kids. And like a common rule is a curfew, right? And most people were raised with curfews, give curfews to their kids. And here's the difference that I see. So when I was a kid growing up, my two older sisters, so I kind of watched this going on. My dad would have, he was old school dad a while ago, and he would have like curfew was 10 o'clock, whatever it is. And boy, I would see him get up, start pacing and huffing at 9:55. And then at 10, he'd be telling my mom that the girls are going to be in trouble. And then at 10:03, they walked in and all hell broke loose. Now he's angry, he's screaming, he's talking about punishment. Now, they are now going to lie. Oh, look at my watch. It's only 9:55, Dad. Well, of course, he doesn't believe that for a second. He's made them scared, guilty, probably feelings of guilt. And the whole conversation now, it's all about power. It's about respect. They feel like this is Dad's house, not our house. It's Dad's family, not our family. Could it
also be about integrity, that he's looking to set those rules so that people know that we value if we set a time together and that's the rule or the curfew or the principle that you let somebody know if you're going to be late, and maybe it's about integrity and then it's value connected.
Yeah, and I like the word principle more than rule. I mean, my kids have never come in like late or anything like that. I've never had a curfew with them, but I've had plenty of conversations that have said, hey, you're going to this high school party. What time are you coming home tonight?
Right.
Well, everybody else is coming home midnight. And I say, that sounds a little late to me because you know what? I love you guys so much and I'm going to worry so much about you coming home safely that I'm not going to be able to fall asleep until I know you guys are home safely. And by the way, I've got to get up early to take your son to a 7 a.m. basketball game, so I can't sleep in tomorrow either. Any chance that you guys can get home at 11 instead? And then they say, okay. And then if they come home at 10:55 or 11:05, it's not like, oh my God, you've disrespected me. It's 5 minutes. You have no integrity. It's about a conversation around care. It's coming from a place of caring.
Yeah.
It's talking about what we value. I mean, I've got friends who are in marriages that are filled with rules. You're not allowed to do this on Sunday, or you're not allowed to go here, or you can't text that person anymore from your past. And the rules are always coming from a good place of intention. But if it's a rule like I am putting my foot down and you are not allowed to, it changes the relationship.
Yeah.
It's not a conversation and it doesn't become values-based. If someone together says, hey, listen, I am feeling anxious and concerned about you texting this person from your past, and we know statistics, whatever, I'm making this up, of course, on the fly, Penny, but half of marriages break up and half don't have infidelity. So I'm really worried about you texting. Well, I would be way more likely to say, like, I never saw it that way. I didn't realize you even worried about it. Of course, it means nothing. We're just friends. But I didn't know that you had these feelings. Of course, I value our related feelings way more. It's not that important. I respect where you're coming from. I'm not going to text her anymore.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like, I want to follow the principle. I agree with the values. And I feel like I've been heard a little bit. Like this is still our relationship, not your relationship or our agreement. It is subtle. Like, is it a principle? Is it a rule? It is subtle.
Yeah, and I'm bringing it up because I'm also very word-oriented, right? I agree with you. I just wanted to play the various different sides, think about the different sides, because I actually have a framework that I created around, I call it, like, if you took a triangle, one side is expectation and the other side that make up the peak is intent.
Mm-hmm.
And trust goes right down the middle. And when all is balanced, expectation and intent are aligned, then we're in trust. And I found this out in the weirdest way in a work relationship. And when trust goes down, unfortunately, it makes no sense whatsoever, but expectations go up. And that's why rules go up. That's why people create more rules and more boundaries, because it's almost like a fear factor, right? Like, let's make it even harder for this person or anybody else to meet it. And it's all because of like this fear, because the trust has lowered. So, and I had a relationship with somebody on the executive team where I realized that my trust had gone down. And so weirdly enough, I had all these additional expectations with him. And another managing partner that I was working with on the management team, we trusted each other implicitly and we had no expectations of one another. Like, mistakes could happen. It was roll it under the carpet. Who cares? Like, we'll work it out. Unbelievable. So I believe that they're trust-based. And so when you say no rules, I think it's because when you come from a place of trust, you're creating trust, then you don't need to have those rules so set in stone. Like you said, it's communication based on values and principles. I was just playing the different sides of things because I think there's a lot of people who may see them as different ways, but that's something that I found about rules and trust that actually surprised me.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I like that model that you described. I kind of jotted that triangle down in front of me. And I could see that. I'm now thinking about recent experiences in my work life where, to me, it's almost like that downward spiral where someone doesn't meet expectations and then that trust goes down. And now I'm almost like more aware, like, hey, are they going to meet this other expectation? Hey, look at that. They didn't meet that one either. The trust goes down again.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it's like the confirming bias. I'm noticing, I'm hyper aware of the ways they're not meeting my expectation.
Exactly. And actually, you probably weren't even aware that you had half of those expectations.
Right.
They showed up. It is an interesting thing that I discovered and gives us the ability as leaders, individuals, and all of our relationships to really reevaluate our trust. If we see that we're putting a lot of rules on things, then we can reevaluate where our trust is and work on the trust.
Yeah, that's right.
So great. We're like, I could talk to you forever. I'm really enjoying our conversation, but probably our listeners are like, okay, I've got to get out of the car now. So tell me, what's one last thing that you'd really like to leave the listeners of Take Back Time, what you'd like to leave them with?
I think Great Leaders Have No Rules is about really challenging conventional wisdom. And I'll just do two quick takeaways. On the productivity side, I say, think about protecting your deep work focused time. So maybe you don't close your door all day long, but at least close it for a couple of hours. And on the rules side of things, just as we've been doing in this fun conversation, think about leading yourself, think about your marriage, your kids, and of course at work. Are there rules you have that are just too stringent, that haven't been challenged? And just have a conversation. If you've got a curfew and like it, great, but have a conversation with your kids about it. Like, hey, what do you think about the curfew? Why do you think I have a curfew? What would you do differently about the curfew? And you'll strengthen the compliance and the relationship just by talking it through. Absolutely.
Those are great takeaways. And I'd like to add one more of something you said earlier that I didn't highlight, but I did circle on my notes here. And that was that you said that in all the interviews that you did, and John Maxwell specifically takes a week at the end of the year to reflect. And so I would dare say, if you went through all your interviews, is it fair to say that reflection time and really assessing what works and doesn't work was something that successful, productive people spend their time on and invest their time in. Is that the truth?
Absolutely. And in fact, many of them literally scheduled that time on their calendar. It was like 1 hour for reflection at the end of the day, or reflection and gratitude. They all had their own spin on it. It was so important. They were literally scheduling it into their day or at the end of their week.
Absolutely. So I wanted to leave people with that as a takeaway as well, because that's something that I think most people do not invest the time in. So
Penny, thank you so much. I really appreciated the chance to come on. It's been so much fun talking to you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. And I know that our listeners have taken away a lot of golden nuggets. Where's the best place for them to reach you, and how can they get a hold of your new book?
Yeah, Great Leaders Have No Rules, available in all bookstores and online, Amazon.com, of course. And the best way to get a hold of me is my company is called LEADx, LEADx.org, O-R-G. So Kevin@LEADx.org. Would love to hear from your listeners, and always read and reply to anybody that reaches out.
Great. Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Penny.
And thank you all for being here, and make sure that you've taken a couple notes down and that you're going to reflect on them at the end of today when you block that into your calendar. So my name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening. Today's topic is another opportunity for you to put the knowledge you learned into practice. Tune in again next week for more strategies that will help you have more energy and focus to get more done in less time, so you can continue to take back time.